So I got my son a 6-port aftermarket battery charger, and it actually ruined a couple of his batteries. Instead of charging it, killed them. You can see here they had barely 2 volts coming out of the batteries. So I took a small screwdriver, popped the cap off of one of the top screws, dug in, popped it loose, took a Torx security bit that you can get at a local import tool place, and I pulled the 5 screws out of the top of the battery so that I could get access to the actual cells. Took a flat screwdriver, popped the case the rest of the way open. It was pretty easy, just gave it a little bit of a nudge in a couple of places, and it popped loose, and I was able to pull the top off of the battery. And you want to be careful doing this so that you don't pull the components apart. And then I lifted out the spring clips and flipped it over, and what was left after the plastic was off was just the batteries soldered together and the battery management system. So I measured each cell just to see if they were dramatically different, and they all measured a little less than half of a volt on each cell. So no one cell was different than the rest, and that's something that you probably want to test to see if maybe a cell really went bad. In this case, I think the charger just drained the batteries dry to the point where you couldn't charge them anymore. And the same thing would happen if you stored one for too long. They'd drain dry, and you'd need to do the same process. So after testing all of these, I decided to use a voltage regulator that I have that's variable, and it only goes 6 volts and above, 6 to 12 volts. So I couldn't do just one battery at a time. So I chose to do 2 batteries and then 3 batteries, since there's 5 batteries in the pack here. And I clipped somewhere on the board, the closest place I could get to that was actually soldered to the positive and negative connections on there, and turned on the battery charger. And the left meter is actually an ammeter, and I cranked the voltage up. Typically 2 cells would charge at about 8.4 volts or so, but instead of using voltage, I looked at the amperage and tried to keep it just below 1 amp of charge. And that turned out to be, in this case, about a little under 7 volts. I was trying to be conservative because I don't want to cause the batteries to blow up, and I did it for about 2 minutes. And then I switched over, measured those batteries after I disconnected the charger, and they measured about 3.5 volts apiece. So the other 3 batteries that are in there, the battery cells, I charged, and they would typically charge at around 12 volts for 3. They carry 3.7 each, but they charge a little bit hotter than that, maybe 4.2. So I clipped that on with the correct polarity across those 3 cells, and they're already hooked together on the board so that they go from here on this cell, goes across to this cell, goes across to this cell. So that's why I clipped where I could. And in this case, I turned on the power supply and slowly turned it up to just under 12 volts, and I got the just under 1 amp of charge that I was looking for. I left that for about 2 or 3 minutes, and it did the same thing. And I'll check those battery cells here in a second, but it charged them all to about 3.5 volts, which is enough to allow the battery to charge on the charger. So I unclipped the leads, turned the meter back on, and just took a look at each of the cells. And they all tested pretty close to 3.5 volts, which is fine. So I disconnected the meter and got out the regular Ryobi battery charger, just a single charger, and I slid the top back down so that I could slide it on to the battery charger to make sure it would take a charge. I shoved it down into the battery charger. It flashed red for a few seconds as it was testing, and then flashed green, which means it was charging. I charged it for a little while just to make sure it was going to charge. I pulled it off. It wasn't fully charged, but I tested the battery again, and where we used to have less than 2 volts, I now have 18.5 volts coming out of the battery. So the charging is working. Charge it the rest of the way and put it in this vacuum cleaner as a test after I reassembled it.